I wasn't looking for anything. It was just a routine scroll, a break between shifts. I was exhausted, mentally fried from 12 hours of ICU alarms and decisions that weighed more than they should. So when I opened Facebook and saw my mom's latest post, it took a full minute for my brain to process what I was seeing. The picture was bright, almost too bright. A cliffside in Greece, everyone dressed in summer whites, sunglasses tilted just so, holding glasses of wine. My mom was in the center, grinning. Beside her stood my stepfather Clifford, my half-siblings Ellie and Jason, and Ellie's boyfriend. The caption read, "Nothing but real family on this journey." I stared at the screen. My thumb hovered, not scrolling, not reacting. My mind kept repeating the same words over and over. Nothing but real family. I wasn't in the picture. I wasn't on the trip. I wasn't even informed. I felt this slow burn rise in my chest, not quite anger, yet just disbelief. No one had mentioned a vacation. No group text, no call, no, "Hey, we're planning something." I had spoken to my mom 3 days earlier. She said nothing. I locked my phone and went back to work trying to shake it off. Maybe it was spontaneous. Maybe someone else paid. Maybe it wasn't as personal as it looked. 2 days later, I checked my emergency account. I don't check it often. It's not tied to my daily spending, just savings, quiet money I built up over the years. For hospital bills, unexpected repairs, safety. But when I opened the app, the balance was almost empty. $8,957, gone. And just like that, everything made sense. My name is Leona Ward. I'm 34 years old, an ICU nurse based in Philadelphia, and for the last decade, I've lived a life that most people would call quiet. I work nights, 12-hour shifts that stretch into 14 if the hospital's understaffed, which it usually is. I live alone in a 2-bedroom apartment near Rittenhouse, modest but safe. I'm not married. Never really got close. I've had a few relationships over the years, but nothing stuck. Between the hours, the emotional toll, and always being the one who shows up when things go wrong, I guess it made sense that I stopped trying. I'm not bitter about that. I like my independence. I like knowing I'm capable, but I also know what it feels like to be the one people only call when they need something. My mom, Deborah, remarried when I was 20. My father had died a few years earlier, lung cancer, and after a long stretch of grief and financial instability, she met Clifford, a real estate agent with charm and 2 kids of his own. Jason was a year younger than me, and Ellie was still in high school when they moved in. I never truly felt part of that household. I stayed in college housing, worked through nursing school, and paid my own way. But I'd still get the calls. Car repairs bills were short this month. I helped where I could. It always felt like an unspoken deal. I'd be the responsible one, the one with a stable job and a clear head, and in return, I'd get what acknowledgement, inclusion, I'm not sure anymore. What I do know is that over the years, I became the default safety net. Clifford once called me the glue that held the family together, but only when he needed to justify borrowing money for a down payment he couldn't afford. Ellie always smiled in that soft, fake way that made me feel like an outsider in my own mother's kitchen. Jason rarely said much at all. My mother, well, she floated between warmth and distance like it was a dial she controlled, depending on who else was in the room. We didn't have fights, not exactly. Just these long stretches of silence peppered with holiday visits and forced conversations. I knew I wasn't their center. I just didn't realize how far out of orbit I had drifted. A few years ago, I opened a separate account, emergency savings, not connected to my debit card, no auto transfers, no shared access. Just a digital vault for when things went wrong. I contributed slowly, $50 here, $100 there. It wasn't easy with hospital wages and student loans, but I managed to save $10,000 over time. It wasn't for vacations. It wasn't for family emergencies that didn't involve me. It was for when my brakes gave out on the highway, or I broke my wrist during a shift, or when I needed breathing room after a particularly cruel flu season. It was mine. No one else knew the full details of that account, or so I thought. The only person who had even seen the app was my mom. 2 years ago, when I helped her pay off a surprise tax bill, she saw me move funds between accounts. She asked how I kept things so organized, and I remember showing her how I used 2-factor authentication and how the bank let me create a secondary passcode for transfers. She watched closely, said nothing. I didn't think anything of it. I had no reason to. Until that morning, 2 days after the Facebook post, when I saw the balance and felt the kind of betrayal that doesn't come with screaming, just a cold mechanical silence. I refreshed the page twice, looked at the transaction history, flights, multiple seats, one reservation, then a hotel, a resort in Santorini, then a ferry booking, restaurant names, a private cruise. The list went on. It wasn't a trip. It was a luxury vacation, and it had been paid for using my account. At first, I didn't do anything. I just sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the numbers on the screen. The total damage sat at $8,957 withdrawn in 8 separate charges over the span of 2 days. I clicked through the transaction history with mechanical precision. The first charge was airfare all under a single booking code leaving from JFK to Athens with connecting seats that matched the timeline in my mom's photos. The next was a 5-star resort in Santorini. Then a ferry booking some boutique restaurants, a private sailing tour. The amounts were not small. Every single purchase screamed indulgence. This wasn't a family just grabbing a deal. This was planned, coordinated. They didn't just exclude me. They funded the trip with my money, and I would have never known if I hadn't checked the account. I work too much, sleep too little. That emergency fund is the one account I never touch unless absolutely necessary, which is probably why they thought they could get away with it. I remember breathing slowly, trying to stop my hands from shaking. Not from rage, not yet. It was something heavier than that. The realization that the people you've spent your entire life trying to keep afloat would cut you out the moment it suited them. Then came the message. I was making dinner phone propped up on the counter, music playing, when I saw it. A text from Ellie. It popped up on the screen like any other. Hey, just make sure she never sees the full charge. She hardly checks that account anyway. Followed by a second text. LOL, we'll just say it was shared. She won't make a thing of it. My stomach dropped. I froze mid-step. There was no ambiguity. It was clear she meant to send that to someone else, probably Clifford or my mom. I let the knife rest on the cutting board, picked up the phone, and replied with just 2 words. I noticed. There was no reply. 10 minutes passed, then 15. The 3 dots appeared and disappeared twice, then nothing. The silence felt louder than a scream. I called the bank, immediately reported every charge as unauthorized. I gave them every detail, every receipt, every screenshot. I filed a fraud report. When they asked, "Are you saying this was done by someone you know?" I said yes. My family. The woman on the line was quiet for a moment before continuing the intake process. Her tone changed. She was careful, meticulous. She asked if there was a police report. Not yet, I said, but there might be. I spent that night compiling everything. The timeline, the transactions, the photos, the messages. I opened a folder labeled Proof. My apartment was quiet. Outside, I could hear someone walking their dog, the soft thump of paws on pavement. But inside, it felt like everything had stopped. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just sat on the floor, legs crossed, staring at the digital evidence of my own erasure. They went on a dream vacation without me, lied about it, used my money, and bragged online as if I didn't exist, as if I wasn't real family. The phrase from the caption kept looping in my mind. Nothing but real family on this journey. What did that make me? A donor. A ghost. The next morning, I filed a report with the local precinct. The officer who took my statement was polite but tired, probably nearing the end of his shift. He asked the basics logged. The complaint gave me a case number. I didn't expect fireworks. I just wanted it on record. Then I called Tamara. We hadn't spoken in months. She was an old college friend who went into law. We reconnected a few years ago over coffee but hadn't kept in touch. I explained what happened. She didn't interrupt. She didn't say, "I'm sure there's a misunderstanding." When I finished, she said, "That's fraud, and if you're ready to pursue it, I'll help you build the case." She didn't hesitate. That mattered more than she probably realized. I sent her everything. Within hours, she had a strategy. This was civil. It could go to court. The evidence was strong, and best of all, the money trail was digital. They couldn't say it was cash or miscommunication. It was numbers. It was dates. It was IP addresses. I felt something shift in me. Not anger, not vengeance, something colder. Purpose. My family had stolen from me deliberately, and now I was going to make sure they never forgot it. Tamara moved quickly. She drafted a formal demand letter to be sent to my mother and stepfather outlining the unauthorized use of my financial assets, including a breakdown of the transactions and a request for immediate repayment within 15 business days. It wasn't just a warning, it was a precursor to legal action. Meanwhile, I continued gathering everything I could. I downloaded full bank statements, copied every confirmation email, and archived screenshots of their social media posts from the trip. My mother had posted stories from the resort, one of them showing a bottle of champagne on a balcony captioned, "We deserve this." Ellie had posted a boomerang of herself dancing on a ferry deck, tagging the name of the boat and the location. Jason didn't post much, but he was in every photo holding drinks, leaning against stone ruins, smiling like he belonged. I saved them all. On the 6th day after the initial discovery, I received a response not to me, but to Tamara's letter. It was from a family attorney representing my mother and Clifford. The tone was casual, dismissive. They claimed the account had been offered to support the trip, that there was a verbal understanding. Tamara called it what it was, bluffing. No signed consent. No texts confirming approval. Nothing but theft and backpedaling. She told me to ignore them, let her handle it. But I kept getting messages. First, a group text from my mother as if everything was normal. "Hey, sweetheart, we're back in town. Want to grab dinner this weekend?" Then a second message, more pointed. "Let's not make a big deal out of this. It was a misunderstanding. You've always been generous. This isn't like you." I didn't reply. I didn't block them either. I wanted the messages documented, proof of tone, proof of manipulation. Then came the calls. I let them ring. I didn't want to hear their voices. I was afraid it would shake something in me, soften the lines I had drawn. But the truth is, I didn't owe them anything anymore. They crossed a line that wasn't just about money. It was about respect, about visibility, about being treated like more than an afterthought. I remembered years of birthdays where I was the one baking the cake, paying the bill, sending the gifts. I remembered the Christmas where I worked 3 overnight shifts in a row to afford presents for everyone while they unwrapped them without me. This wasn't new. It was just finally visible. By the end of the second week, Tamara had everything she needed. She filed the civil complaint with the Philadelphia County Court, naming my mother, Clifford, Ellie, and Jason as co-defendants in a case of unauthorized use of financial assets with damages totaling $8,957 plus an additional claim for emotional distress. It felt surreal. My name attached to a lawsuit against my own family. But the moment the filing went through, something in me clicked into place. I wasn't being dramatic. I wasn't overreacting. I was doing what had to be done. The day after the filing, Ellie texted me again. "What's going on? Are you really taking this to court? Mom is freaking out. She says you're blowing everything out of proportion. We're family. Please don't do this." I didn't answer. Not because I didn't have words, but because the words no longer mattered. They had their chance to speak honestly. They chose silence, dismissal, and lies. A few days later, my mom called from a blocked number. I recognized her voice the second I picked up. It was sweet, trembling, rehearsed. "Honey, this isn't who you are. You've always been understanding. Why are you doing this? We're your family. We didn't mean to hurt you. We thought it would be okay." I stayed silent. She went on listing excuses, vague apologies without specifics. Then she said something that made me grip the phone tighter. "We just assumed the account was for everyone. You've always said we could count on you. That's what families do. They help each other." I cut in. "No, that's what users do. They help themselves. You didn't ask. You took. And now you're panicking because I finally said enough." She tried to speak again, but I ended the call. That night, I couldn't sleep. Not from guilt, but from clarity. I had spent years keeping peace, folding myself into the margins of this family, hoping they'd one day see me as central. But they never did. I was the backup, the bank, the fixer. Now I was their opponent, and I wasn't backing down. A week later, they were served, individually. At home, at work, wherever Tamara's process server could find them. My mother reportedly cried. Clifford called Tamara trying to intimidate her. Ellie posted a cryptic quote on Instagram about betrayal. Jason stayed silent. I kept waiting for someone to apologize, to say they were wrong. No one did. They were more upset about being exposed than about what they did. That was the final confirmation. I had made the right choice. They showed up at my apartment 3 days after the court papers were delivered. I had just come off a night shift, my hair still damp from a rushed shower, when the buzzer rang. I didn't expect anyone. No packages. No deliveries. When I looked through the peephole, they were all there. My mother in a stiff blouse like she was dressing for sympathy, Clifford holding a manila envelope. Ellie with oversized sunglasses even though it was cloudy, and Jason arms crossed like he'd been dragged there. I opened the door, not because I wanted to, but because I needed to hear what excuse they would come up with in person. My mother spoke first, all breathy and gentle. "Leona, honey, we need to talk. This has gone too far." Clifford stepped in. "We just want to clear the air. No lawyers, no drama, just family." I leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. "You stole from me." My voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. My mother's smile faltered. "We didn't steal. We misunderstood. You've always helped when we needed it. This was just a little extension of that. We thought you'd be okay with it." Ellie cut in. "It's not like you were using the money. We figured, I don't know you'd understand. You're always so calm." Jason muttered, "This is embarrassing. Can we just move on?" I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, but because the audacity was staggering. "You didn't ask," I said. "You didn't even tell me. You posted about it like I was dead." My mom bristled. "That post wasn't about you. Don't twist it. Real family doesn't mean excluding you." It was just a phrase. A phrase that followed a theft I said, and a lie, and a trip you never intended to invite me on. Clifford stepped forward, holding out the envelope. "Here, it's a check. We're willing to pay back some of it. Let's just end this." I didn't take it. How much I asked. $5,000. That's what we could gather quickly. The rest, we can figure out. That's not how this works. The lawsuit is for the full amount, with damages. This isn't a bargain. Ellie took off her sunglasses. Her eyes were red. "Do you really hate us that much? Are you so obsessed with being right that you'd drag us through court?" "You did that yourselves," I said. All I did was say no for once. My mother's voice cracked. "You're destroying this family. Over money. Over a mistake." I shook my head. Over betrayal. Over being used. Over years of being treated like a second-tier relative. Clifford raised his voice for the first time. "Fine. Take it to court, but don't expect us to sit quietly while you try to ruin our names. We'll fight back." "Then fight," I said, "but bring facts, not guilt trips." They stood there for a moment like they expected me to change my mind if they just looked sad enough. I didn't move. I didn't flinch. Finally, they left. No goodbyes. No apologies. Just silence and footsteps fading down the hallway. After they were gone, I closed the door and locked it. I stood in the middle of my living room, the envelope still untouched on the floor, and felt something shift. Not victory, not relief, just resolve. I wasn't afraid of the courtroom. I was afraid of what staying silent would do to me. The next few days passed in a blur. Tamara scheduled a preliminary hearing. The defendants filed a weak response claiming miscommunication and shared intent, but it didn't hold. The judge allowed the case to proceed. Court date set. Discovery phase started. Tamara asked me to review documents, provide any more evidence. I sent everything, every post, every text, including one Ellie sent to her boyfriend, which had been forwarded to me anonymously. It read, "She'll cave. She always does. She hates confrontation." That made me laugh. Not because they were wrong before, but because they were finally about to meet the version of me that had learned how to stop folding. 1 week before the court date, I saw my mother outside the hospital. She wasn't waiting for me. She was just there, standing near the parking lot with a coffee in hand, pretending not to notice me. But I knew better. She looked tired, older than I remembered. She didn't approach, and I didn't offer a greeting. That unspoken distance was louder than any argument. She wanted me to feel the weight of her presence. I only felt clarity. The night before the trial, I barely slept. Not from fear, but anticipation. I reviewed my notes, reread the timelines, checked every document twice. This wasn't just about money anymore. It was about dignity, about closure, about finally drawing a line and saying, "You don't get to erase me anymore." The courtroom was smaller than I expected. Rows of wooden benches, muted beige walls, a single overhead fan that buzzed with every rotation. Tamara and I arrived early, settled into the left side facing the judge's bench. I kept my hands folded in my lap, my nerves held in place by sheer preparation. On the right side, my mother and Clifford walked in together, followed by Ellie and Jason. None of them looked at me. My mother wore a navy blazer, her hair pulled back too tightly. Clifford looked stiff in a suit he clearly hadn't worn in years. Ellie kept her sunglasses on until the bailiff asked her to remove them. Jason, as always, remained expressionless. The judge entered an older woman with sharp eyes and a calm but commanding tone. She called the case number Leona Ward versus Deborah Ward, Clifford Shaw, Ellie Shaw, and Jason Shaw. Hearing it out loud gave the entire situation a surreal finality. Tamara stood first. She laid out the facts. A clear timeline of transactions, digital receipts, travel confirmations, the matching dates and locations of the Facebook posts, the text messages, including the one Ellie had mistakenly sent me. She explained that the account in question was in my name, only funded solely by my income and used without permission. She played the bank's customer service recording, confirming that no authorized users were added. Then she presented the screenshot of Ellie's message. "She won't notice. She hardly checks that account anyway." The courtroom was silent. The judge asked Miss Ward, "Were you ever asked for permission to fund this trip?" "No, Your Honor." "Did you ever agree verbally or otherwise to let your family use this account?" "Never." The judge nodded, jotting something down. Tamara sat. Then their side was called. My mother stood first. She spoke softly, carefully. She painted a picture of miscommunication, said she believed the account was shared, that I had always been generous and she didn't think I would mind. She claimed there was no malicious intent. The judge asked, "Is your name listed on the account?" "No, but did your daughter tell you you could use it?" "She didn't say no." "That's not the same as yes," the judge replied. Clifford followed, speaking like a businessman caught in a bad deal. He tried to use words like family fund and mutual benefit. The judge cut him off. "Did you contribute financially to this account?" Number Ellie spoke next. Her voice was tight defensive. She claimed she thought I was invited, that it wasn't her fault I didn't come, and that I had always supported their family before. She said the text was a joke taken out of context. The judge asked, "Were you aware the account belonged solely to your sister?" "Yes." "Then why would you make purchases on it without asking? I didn't personally book anything." "My mom handled it." Jason didn't speak. He just sat there, eyes down, as if waiting for it to be over. The judge looked at them all, then turned to her notes. "This case isn't about miscommunication. It's about entitlement, about deliberate access and use of funds that were not offered or available to the defendants. The evidence is clear. The plaintiff's case is substantiated. I am ruling in favor of Miss Ward. Full repayment of $8,957 is to be made within 60 days. Additionally, due to the calculated nature of the theft, the defendants will pay an additional $2,000 for emotional distress. And due to the deceptive planning and exclusion involved, both Deborah Ward and Clifford Shaw are sentenced to 50 hours of community service each. Ellie Shaw will attend a financial ethics course. Jason Shaw's involvement was passive and will not receive additional penalties beyond restitution. The courtroom didn't erupt. No shouting, no objections, just stunned silence. My mother's mouth parted slightly as if to protest, but no sound came. Clifford clenched his jaw. Ellie looked like she might cry, but no tears came. Jason blinked slowly, expression unchanged. Tamara placed her hand lightly on mine, steady. The bailiff handed over the paperwork. Terms, deadlines, assignments. It was official. It was over. Outside, the air was heavy. A few reporters had shown up after catching wind of a local civil case involving family fraud. They snapped photos as we exited. My mother tried to shield her face. Clifford walked ahead. Ellie refused to make eye contact. Jason lit a cigarette before even reaching the curb. I didn't speak to them. I didn't need to. The court had already said everything for me. Tamara and I walked toward the parking lot. She asked if I was okay. I nodded, tired, but yes. We reached her car and I paused. Behind us, I heard my name. My mother stood by the courthouse steps, her voice low but piercing. "You've destroyed this family." I turned. "No," I said. "I just stopped funding the fantasy." She didn't reply. Just turned away as if that was the last card she could play, as if guilt would work one final time. It didn't. I got into Tamara's car, rolled down the window as we pulled away. The courthouse shrank in the distance, and with it the version of myself that used to believe silence was safer than confrontation. In the weeks that followed, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. Not the kind that comes from everything being perfect, but the kind that settles when you finally stop carrying things that were never yours to hold. The payments started arriving through court-mandated installments. Small amounts at first, transferred on time, likely to avoid wage garnishment. I didn't watch them like a hawk. I didn't need to. It wasn't about the money anymore. It was about what the process had restored in me, a sense of boundaries, a sense of worth. I moved to a different part of the city, closer to the hospital, quieter at night. I changed my number, updated my banking info. I didn't give the new address to anyone in my family, not even Tamara until weeks later. It wasn't paranoia, it was preservation. Ellie unfollowed me on social media. Jason never reached out. Clifford tried once through a generic email, something vague about apologies and healing. I deleted it without reading the full thing. My mother stayed silent. No calls, no messages. Just absence. For the first time, I was okay with that. I spent more time at work, but in a different way. I was present. My patients felt less like emotional anchors and more like reminders that I still had purpose. Tamara and I kept in touch. We had lunch every couple of weeks, talked about cases' life books. One day she looked at me and said, "You know you're not the same person I met 2 months ago." I smiled. That's the point. I wasn't angry anymore, just aware. Aware of what I had allowed, what I had excused, and what I would never permit again. Family is a complicated word. We grow up believing it means loyalty, unconditional support, love without limits. But sometimes family means the people who take most from you because they think you'll never fight back. And when you finally do, they call it betrayal. I used to think keeping the peace meant keeping quiet. That maturity meant tolerating everything with grace. But grace without boundaries isn't maturity. It's martyrdom. What they did wasn't a mistake. It was a choice. A series of calculated actions carried out under the assumption that I wouldn't resist. They banked on my silence. They were wrong. The funny thing is, they'll probably keep telling the story differently. In their version, I overreacted. I ruined everything. I humiliated the family. But in mine, I drew a line and refused to let them cross it again. Both versions exist. Only one is grounded in truth. A few months after the verdict, I walked past a store window and saw a travel poster. Greece, white rooftops, endless blue water, the same place they went without me, the same place I paid for without knowing. I didn't flinch. I didn't feel a surge of bitterness. I just kept walking. I wasn't trapped in that story anymore. It didn't define me. It simply revealed them. And that was enough. I've been asked if I regret it, if I'd take it back to keep the peace. The answer is no. I didn't destroy the family. I exposed the truth. They destroyed the illusion. And maybe that illusion needed to die for me to finally live fully. Because the moment I stood up and said no more, that was the moment I became free.